I'm Dr. Isabella Vega, and I used to run the forensic cleaning division at Phoenix Bio-Recovery Solutions in Tucson, Arizona. Or at least I did, until I submitted my resignation 4 weeks ago. You can call me Dr. Vega if you want, though most people in the crime scene cleanup business just called me Izzy during my 18 years in the field. I've cleaned up after every kind of human tragedy you can imagine: homicides, suicides, overdoses, industrial accidents, and scenes so brutal that veteran detectives would step outside to compose themselves. But what I'm about to tell you about is the one case that didn't just challenge my professional training, it fundamentally altered my understanding of what's possible in this world, and ultimately forced me to walk away from a career I'd built my entire adult life around. Let me be clear from the start. I'm a medical doctor with specialized training in forensic pathology. I have an MD from Stanford Medical School and completed my residency in forensic pathology at the University of California, San Francisco, before transitioning into crime scene cleanup work. This wasn't some career accident or desperate fallback plan after failing in traditional medicine. After years of working with deceased patients in sterile morgue environments, conducting autopsies for the medical examiner's office, and testifying in criminal trials, I was drawn to the intersection of medicine, investigation, and restoration that crime scene cleaning provided. Crime scene cleaning requires extensive medical knowledge, meticulous attention to detail, and the psychological fortitude to process human trauma in ways most people never could or would want to. It's not just about removing blood and bodily fluids, though that's certainly part of it. It's about understanding infectious disease protocols, recognizing potential health hazards, assessing structural damage from biological contamination, and having the medical expertise to ensure that a space is truly safe for human habitation again. Phoenix Bio-Recovery Solutions is the largest and most specialized crime scene cleanup company in the American Southwest, covering Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Southern California. We're not the company that gets called for routine cleanups that any commercial cleaning service could handle. We're the specialists who get contacted when a scene is too complex, too contaminated, too psychologically challenging, or too medically dangerous for standard cleaning crews to manage safely. During my 18 years there, I supervised cleanups that made national news, cases that required level 4 biohazard protocols, and scenes where the psychological impact on our team was so severe that we had to implement mandatory counseling sessions and rotate personnel to prevent long-term trauma. I've walked into homes where entire families were murdered in their sleep, apartments where people lay undiscovered for months during Arizona's brutal summer heat, manufacturing facilities where industrial accidents created biohazard conditions that took weeks to remediate safely, and cartel-related crime scenes where the level of violence was so extreme that local law enforcement requested our team sign additional confidentiality agreements. I've seen the absolute worst of what humans can do to each other and what circumstances can do to human beings. I've cleaned up after serial killers, mass shootings, ritual murders, and accidents so grotesque that the images would haunt most people for the rest of their lives. Through it all, I maintained my professional composure and medical objectivity. Every scene, no matter how disturbing or seemingly impossible to clean, had a logical explanation rooted in science and medicine. Every cleanup followed established protocols that I had helped develop. Every case, no matter how psychologically challenging, eventually became just another file in our completed projects database, until November 3rd, 2023, when we received a call that would change everything I thought I knew about the nature of reality itself. My journey to crime scene cleaning wasn't the conventional path most people might expect for someone with a medical degree from one of the country's top medical schools. After completing my forensic pathology residency in 2005, I spent 4 years working in various medical examiner offices throughout California and Arizona. The work was intellectually stimulating and socially important, determining causes of death, conducting autopsies, analyzing tissue samples, testifying in criminal and civil proceedings. But something fundamental was missing for me personally. Working in sterile morgue environments, I felt disconnected from the human impact of the tragedies I was investigating. I was examining the end result of violence, accidents, and suspicious deaths, but I wasn't involved in the restoration process that allowed families and communities to begin healing. The dead came to me as medical puzzles to solve, but I never saw the environments where they had lived and died, never witnessed the full scope of how tragedy impacts the physical spaces where people's lives unfold. In 2009, I encountered Phoenix Bio-Recovery Solutions during a consultation on a particularly complex case involving multiple decomposed bodies discovered in a luxury resort in Scottsdale. The cleanup crew was struggling with contamination that had spread through the resort's elaborate ventilation system, and they needed medical expertise to ensure the remediation was thorough enough to prevent long-term health risks to future guests and staff. I was fascinated by the intersection of medical knowledge and practical restoration work that the job required. The owner of Phoenix Bio-Recovery, Maria Santos, was a former emergency room nurse who had built the company from a small local operation into the Southwest's premier crime scene cleanup service. She recognized that my medical background could bring a level of scientific rigor and safety protocol to their operations that would set them apart from competitors. She offered me a position as their chief medical consultant, with the eventual goal of running their entire forensic division. Within 3 years, I was overseeing their most complex cases and managing a team of 22 specialized technicians handling jobs across 4 states. The work combined my medical training with real-world problem-solving in ways that hospital pathology never could. Instead of simply determining how someone died, I was helping to restore the spaces where they had lived, ensuring that families could reclaim their homes, or that properties could be safely returned to use. Phoenix Bio-Recovery's forensic division handles what the industry classifies as extreme cases, scenes where standard cleaning protocols aren't sufficient, and advanced medical expertise is required to ensure complete decontamination and restoration. The work called in for mass casualty events, industrial accidents involving biological materials, cases with unknown or exotic pathogens, situations where contamination has spread beyond the immediate crime scene, and circumstances where the psychological trauma is so severe that it requires specialized handling protocols. Over my 18 years with the company, I developed cleaning and safety protocols that became industry standards throughout the Southwest and eventually nationally. I published papers on forensic cleaning techniques in medical journals, consulted with law enforcement agencies across multiple states on crime scene preservation and contamination issues, and trained cleaning crews throughout the country on advanced medical safety procedures. I was recognized as one of the leading experts in the field, someone who could handle any scene, no matter how challenging, dangerous, or psychologically disturbing. The medical community respected my unconventional career path because of the scientific rigor I brought to crime scene analysis. Law enforcement agencies valued my ability to provide medical insights that could sometimes aid in their investigations. My team respected my medical background and relied on my ability to remain calm and completely objective in situations that would overwhelm or traumatize most people. I prided myself on being essentially unshakable, the person who could walk into any conceivable scene, quickly assess the medical and safety risks, and develop a systematic evidence-based approach to complete restoration. Colleagues often joked that I had nerves of steel and the emotional detachment of a surgeon. I took these comments as compliments because emotional detachment was essential for effectiveness in my field. During my 18 years at Phoenix Bio-Recovery, I personally supervised cleanups at over 4,200 crime scenes. I'd encountered every type of violence humans can inflict, every form of human tragedy that exists, and every kind of contamination scenario that biological decomposition can create. I thought I'd seen every possible variation of human horror and had developed complete immunity to being surprised, disturbed, or psychologically affected by anything I might discover in my professional work. I had convinced myself that my medical training and years of experience had prepared me for literally anything that could exist in the real world. I was completely catastrophically wrong. Phoenix Biorecovery Solutions operated out of a 15,000 square foot facility in an industrial district on the outskirts of Tucson. The building housed our administrative offices, equipment storage, vehicle maintenance bay, decontamination facilities, and specialized training rooms where we conducted ongoing education for our staff and provided training seminars for law enforcement and other cleanup companies. Our forensic division was the crown jewel of the company's operations, while Phoenix Biorecovery handled routine cleaning services, insurance claims, minor accidents, standard biological cleanup. The forensic division exclusively dealt with criminal cases, mass casualties, and situations requiring advanced medical protocols. We had contracts with police departments, sheriff's offices, federal agencies, insurance companies, and private clients throughout the Southwest. My team consisted of 22 full-time technicians, each with specialized training in different aspects of crime scene cleanup. Unlike typical cleaning companies that might send in workers with minimal training and basic equipment, every member of our forensic team was required to complete 200 hours of initial training, maintain current certifications in hazardous material handling, and participate in monthly continuing education sessions that I personally designed and conducted. Sarah Mitchell was our lead field coordinator, a former Army medic who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before transitioning to civilian emergency response work. Sarah had an almost supernatural ability to assess the psychological impact of scenes on team members and rotate personnel to prevent burnout and trauma accumulation. She was also our expert in handling families and coordinating with law enforcement during active investigation. Carlos Hernandez was our hazmat specialist, with advanced certifications in biological containment and decontamination. Carlos had worked for the CDC's emergency response team before joining our company, and he developed many of our protocols for handling unknown pathogens and exotic biological hazards. If there was any question about the safety of a scene from a medical standpoint, Carlos's assessment was final. Jennifer Park was our structural damage expert, an engineer who specialized in assessing how biological contamination affected building materials, ventilation systems, and structural integrity. Many crime scenes involve contamination that extends far beyond the immediate area where an incident occurred, and Jennifer's expertise often meant the difference between a partial cleanup and complete structural remediation. Marcus Thompson was our documentation specialist, responsible for maintaining the detailed photographic and written records required for insurance claims, legal proceedings, and our own quality control processes. Marcus had a background in forensic photography and an almost obsessive attention to detail that made his documentation invaluable for complex cases. The rest of the team consisted of technicians with various specializations, psychology backgrounds for handling traumatized families, construction experience for structural repairs, advanced medical training for handling decomposition cases, and specialized equipment operators for our most sophisticated cleanup technology. We operated 12 vehicles equipped for different types of responses, standard cleanup trucks for routine cases, hazmat-capable units for dangerous contamination, heavy equipment vehicles for structural work, and mobile command units that could serve as on-site coordination centers for large-scale operations. Our equipment inventory included everything from basic cleaning supplies to military-grade decontamination systems, originally designed for chemical warfare cleanup. The culture of our forensic division was built around medical precision, psychological resilience, and absolute professionalism. We understood that we were often working with families during the worst moments of their lives, and we took seriously our responsibility to restore not just physical spaces, but to contribute to the healing process for everyone affected by tragedy. I had built this team carefully over 18 years, selecting people who combined technical expertise with emotional stability and genuine compassion for others. We functioned like a specialized medical unit, with clear protocols, defined roles, and unwavering commitment to safety and thoroughness. Which is why what happened on November 3rd, 2023, was so completely devastating to everything we thought we knew about our work and ourselves. The call came in on a Friday afternoon at 3:17 p.m. I was in our training facility, conducting a monthly safety review with 6 of our newer technicians, when our dispatch coordinator, Linda Ramirez, interrupted the session with an expression I'd never seen on her face in the 12 years we'd worked together. Linda had been with Phoenix Bio Recovery since before I joined the company. She was a former emergency dispatcher who had transitioned to coordinating our field responses, and in 12 years, I had never seen her rattled by any call or situation. Linda had fielded requests for cleanups involving mass murders, cartel executions, industrial accidents with multiple fatalities, and scenes so gruesome that veteran police officers would warn us before we arrived. Nothing fazed Linda. But the Linda who walked into our training room that afternoon looked genuinely shaken. "Dr. Vega," she said, her voice tight with something between confusion and genuine fear. "I've got Detective Angela Morales from Pima County Sheriff's Office on line 1. She's requesting immediate consultation for a scene in the Catalina foothills. The detective, she specifically asked for you by name and said this was unlike anything their department has ever encountered. The Catalina foothills is one of Tucson's most affluent areas, sprawling luxury homes built into the scenic mountainsides north of the city, the kind of neighborhood where violent crime is so rare that it makes front-page news when it occurs. In 18 years, I could count on one hand the number of crime scenes we'd worked in that area, and they had all been routine accidents or natural deaths. What's the nature of the scene?" I asked, pulling up our standard intake form on my tablet. Linda hesitated in a way that was completely unlike her professional demeanor. "That's the thing, Dr. Vega. Detective Morales wouldn't provide specific details over the phone. She just said it was a single-family residence, one victim, and that they needed you on scene immediately to assess the situation before they could proceed with their investigation. But she kept using the word impossible and saying that they needed someone with advanced medical expertise to help them understand what they were dealing with. In our business, when veteran detectives describe a scene as impossible and specifically request advanced medical consultation, it typically indicates one of several scenarios: decomposition under unusual environmental conditions, potential exposure to exotic biological hazards, contamination that has spread in unexpected ways, or circumstances where the cause of death isn't immediately apparent and might involve unknown substances or pathogens. None of these possibilities were particularly concerning to me. I'd handled similar situations dozens of times over the years, and my medical background specifically prepared me to assess biological and chemical hazards that might not be obvious to law enforcement personnel. "Did she give any indication of timeline or urgency?" I asked Linda while gathering my standard field assessment kit. She said they've had the scene secured since early this morning, but they haven't been able to proceed with their investigation because, Linda paused, consulting her notes, "because every officer who enters the house experiences what she described as severe psychological distress within minutes. She said they've had to rotate personnel every 10 to 15 minutes, and 3 officers have already been transported to the hospital for what they're calling panic attacks. This was unusual but not unprecedented. I'd worked scenes where the psychological impact was so severe that law enforcement personnel required frequent breaks or psychological support. Mass casualty events, scenes involving children, or particularly brutal crimes could sometimes trigger these responses, even in experienced officers." "Anything else?" I asked, selecting additional equipment that might be useful for assessing psychological hazards or environmental factors that could be affecting personnel. Linda looked at her notes again, and I noticed her hands were slightly trembling. "Dr. Vega, Detective Morales asked me to tell you specifically that they need your medical opinion on whether what they're seeing is, and I'm quoting directly, medically possible according to known science. I felt the first stirring of genuine curiosity. In 18 years of crime scene work, I'd never received a request asking me to assess whether something was medically possible according to known science. Every case I'd handled, no matter how unusual or disturbing, had fallen within the parameters of established medical and biological science. I gathered my comprehensive field kit, advanced medical supplies, environmental testing equipment, psychological assessment tools, safety gear, rated for unknown biological hazards, and documentation equipment. I selected Sarah Mitchell and Carlos Hernandez to accompany me. Sarah for her expertise in psychological trauma assessment, and Carlos for his advanced training in biological hazard evaluation. The drive to the Catalina foothills took about 45 minutes through afternoon traffic. The address Detective Morales had provided was on Esperanza Canyon Drive, a winding road that led to some of the most expensive and secluded homes in the Tucson area. As we drove higher into the foothills, the houses became larger and more isolated, separated by acres of pristine desert landscape. What I expected to find was a routine crime scene that had been made psychologically challenging by unusual circumstances, perhaps a particularly brutal crime, an unusual method of death, or environmental factors that were affecting the officer's ability to work effectively. What I didn't expect was what we discovered when we arrived at 4847 Esperanza Canyon Drive. When we arrived at 4847 Esperanza Canyon Drive, the scene was unlike anything I'd encountered in 18 years of crime scene work. The house was a massive southwestern-style mansion built into the mountainside, probably worth several $1,000,000, but it wasn't the house that caught my attention. It was the unprecedented emergency response surrounding it. In addition to the standard police vehicles, there were 6 ambulances, a hazmat response unit, 3 vehicles from the county mental health crisis team, and what appeared to be personnel from the CDC's Rapid Response Division. In nearly 2 decades of crime scene work, I'd never seen such a diverse and extensive emergency response to what had been described as a single victim incident. Detective Angela Morales met us at the perimeter tape. Morales was a 15-year veteran of the Pima County Sheriff's Office, someone I'd worked with on multiple cases over the years. She was known throughout the department for her unflappable demeanor and ability to handle the most disturbing crime scenes without visible emotional impact. But the Detective Morales, who approached our vehicle that afternoon, looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually steady hands were visibly trembling as she signed us in, and she kept glancing back at the house with an expression of barely controlled fear. "Dr. Vega," she said, her voice hoarse and strained. "I've been working homicides for 15 years. I've processed scenes involving torture, dismemberment, ritual murders, and things that would give most people nightmares for life. But what's in that house?" She paused, running her hand through her hair. "I need your medical expertise to tell me if what we're seeing is even possible." I could see several officers standing near the emergency vehicles, and something about their posture and expressions was deeply unsettling. These were veteran law enforcement personnel, people trained to handle human tragedy and violence, but they looked genuinely traumatized. "Detective, what exactly are we dealing with?" I asked, pulling on my protective equipment. Morales took a deep breath. "The victim is Rebecca Thornfield, 34 years old, single, worked as a research psychologist at the University of Arizona. Her housekeeper found her this morning and called 911. When the first responders arrived," she paused again. "Dr. Vega, I've never seen anything like this. Every officer who enters that house experiences immediate, severe psychological distress. We can only stay inside for 10 to 15 minutes before we have to evacuate." She led us toward the house, but stopped about 50 feet from the front door. The victim is in what appears to be a home office on the second floor. There are no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, no indication of violence. The room, she shook her head. The room itself is wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. As we approached the house, I began to feel something I'd never experienced at a crime scene, a sense of overwhelming dread that seemed to emanate from the building itself. Sarah Mitchell, walking beside me, stopped suddenly. "Dr. Vega," she said, her voice tight with confusion. "I can't explain this, but something about this place is affecting me in ways I've never experienced before." Carlos Hernandez was checking his biological detection equipment. "My instruments aren't picking up any chemical or biological hazards," he said. "Whatever's happening here isn't showing up on standard environmental tests." Detective Morales led us through the front door, and immediately I understood why the officers were having such extreme reactions. The house felt wrong in ways I couldn't medically explain. The air seemed thicker, sounds were muffled and distorted, and there was an oppressive sensation that made breathing difficult. "The office is upstairs," Morales said. "I can only stay up there for a few minutes before I start having panic attacks." As we climbed the stairs, the sensation intensified. By the time we reached the second floor, my heart was racing, and I was struggling to maintain my professional composure. Sarah and Carlos were both showing signs of significant distress. The office door was open, and I could see Rebecca Thornfield sitting at her desk, slumped forward, as if she had simply fallen asleep while working. But as I stepped into the room, everything I thought I knew about reality shattered. The room was geometrically impossible. The walls seemed to bend and curve in ways that defied physics. The ceiling appeared to be both higher and lower than it should be simultaneously. Shadows fell in directions that had no relationship to the light sources. Most disturbing of all, Rebecca Thornfield's body appeared to be in multiple positions at once, sitting at the desk, standing by the window, lying on the floor, all simultaneously. "This isn't possible," I whispered, my medical training struggling to process what I was seeing. Carlos was frantically checking his equipment. "There are no hallucinogenic substances in the air," he said, his voice panicked. "No drugs, no chemicals, nothing that could explain this." I forced myself to approach Rebecca's body at the desk, or what appeared to be her primary position. There were no signs of violence, no indication of cause of death. But as I examined her, I realized that her body was showing signs of decomposition that should have taken weeks, while other areas appeared completely fresh. "Dr. Vega," Sarah said from the doorway, "I can't stay in here. Something about this room is affecting my perception in ways that feel dangerous." I tried to conduct a basic examination, but the spatial distortions made it nearly impossible. Time seemed to move differently in the room. My watch showed different times depending on where I looked at it. I could hear Rebecca's voice, faint but distinct, reading research notes about consciousness and perception, even though she was obviously dead. After what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, I had to evacuate the room. The psychological pressure was overwhelming, and I was beginning to experience symptoms I'd never felt before: severe disorientation, panic attacks, and a growing certainty that continued exposure to whatever was in that room would cause permanent psychological damage. Outside the house, I tried to process what I'd witnessed. Everything I'd seen violated the basic laws of physics and biology. The spatial distortions, the multiple positions of the body, the time anomalies, none of it should have been possible, according to any known science. "Detective Morales," I said, struggling to maintain professional composure, "I can't medically explain what's in that room. According to everything I know about biology, physics, and medicine, what we're seeing is impossible." Over the following days, teams of specialists examined the house: physicists, psychologists, medical experts, and researchers from multiple universities. Everyone who entered the office experienced the same impossible phenomena. No equipment could detect any environmental cause. No medical or scientific explanation could account for what was happening. Rebecca Thornfield's research, we discovered, had focused on consciousness and perception, specifically theoretical work on whether human consciousness could alter physical reality under extreme circumstances. Her final research notes, found on her computer, described experiments in consciousness manipulation and reality modification through focused mental energy. The house was eventually sealed by federal authorities. The official cause of death was listed as undetermined, but I knew the truth was far more disturbing. Rebecca Thornfield had somehow discovered a way to alter reality itself, and whatever she had done in that room had created a permanent distortion in the fabric of existence.